At this point in our app, we have the functionality where we are checking the specific text for our to-do list as well as our goals. And if that text contains Bitcoin, then we alert this is a bad idea, and we don't add that text to our final state. And the way that we're doing that is with this check and dispatch function here. And then instead of calling store.dispatch, we just call check and dispatch. And again, though this works, it's a little bit fragile, it's a little bit hacky. What we really want is a clean way to hook into the moment between when an action is dispatched and when the reducer runs. And luckily for us, this is possible natively with Redux, and it's called middleware. So defined, what middleware does is it provides a third-party extension point between dispatching an action and the moment it reaches the reducer. So why is that useful? Well, it's going to be useful in our situation where we want to check if the action contains a specific word, but probably more important than that, you can use it for things like error reporting, logging, even routing. We'll see a couple of those use cases later on, but let's go ahead and refactor our hacky check and dispatch function to actually use Redux middleware. So what we'll do is let's create a new function down here, and this is going to be our first middleware function. We'll call it checker, and it's going to be passed initially the store. And now what I'm going to do next, it's a little bit weird if you're not used to it, and odds are you aren't used to it. So this is a functional programming technique called currying. So what checker is going to do, or what it needs to do, is it needs to return a function. This function is going to be passed next. And what next is it's going to be the next middleware in the chain. So the idea here is if an action is dispatched, before that action hits the reducer, we're going to run the first middleware. And if there's a second middleware, then we're going to run the next one. And then we'll keep doing that until there aren't any more middleware to run. Then next we'll just call dispatch as we're doing here. So again, next is either the next middleware in the middleware chain, or it is dispatch, which we'll then call the reducer. And then from here, what we do, and again, this is where it gets a little bit weird, is we return another function. And this function is going to be passed the specific action. So at this point right here, we have access to store next, which is going to be the next middleware or dispatch, as well as the action which occurred. Now, even the creators of Redux have admitted that this is kind of unnecessary, but in order to not make breaking changes, they've kind of just left it. So it's what we have to deal with so far. But know that whenever you write middleware, this is kind of going to be the way that you do it. And I'll show you the ES6 way here in a second. It's a lot more clean, but for now, let's keep going. So now what we can do at this point right here is this is where all of our middleware code is going to be. And we can actually come up here and just copy what we have, because what we're going to write inside of our middleware is going to be really similar. So I'll just paste this into here and then fix the indentation. And the only thing we need to change is right here, instead of calling store.dispatch passing in the action, we want to call next, because again, there might be another middleware that we need to call after this middleware runs. So if there is, next will do that. And if not, then it will just call dispatch. So what we've done is we now have this middleware function. It looks very similar to our check and dispatch function that we created earlier, but we're going to get rid of check and dispatch, which means we're going to get rid of anywhere that we are calling check and dispatch passing in the store. And we're going to go back to what we had before, which is just store.dispatch. So now we've returned things to what they are. But now what we need to do is we need to tell our Redux store about our middleware function, because right now it has no idea that this checker function exists because we've defined it, but we've never actually informed our store about it. So the way we do that is when we create our store, which we're doing right here, you'll notice what we're doing, the first argument we're passing to it is all of this right here, which is whatever combined reducers is going to return us, which is just one root reducer. And then the second argument we want to pass to create store, so I'm going to put a comma right here, is we're going to call redux.apply middleware, and then we're going to pass to it our middleware function. So again, this is a little bit weird. And if you're not familiar with functional programming, this might be super weird to you based on all of the return functions we had to do earlier and all of these function invocations inside of different function invocations. But again, what we have here is we call create store. We pass to it as the first argument our single reducer, and then we pass to it as the second argument our invocation of redux.apply middleware, passing in checker. So now what should happen is if we refresh, we still have the exact same functionality here. Notice that that text wasn't added to our list, but we can add in different things here. Let's say walk the dog. Should be good. And then if we have Bitcoin, that's going to say nope. And there we go. So what I want to do real quick before we finish is let's head up back to our middleware right here. And again, with ES5 functions, it's a little bit weird because we have a function which returns a function which returns a function. Again, there are reasons for that. We're not going to go into it. And again, the Redux creator set is kind of unnecessary. But the ES6 way to do this looks a lot cleaner. What we can do is we can have a function here using an arrow function that's going to take in the store. And then this function is going to return a function which gets next. And then this function is going to return a function which gets the action. And then we have the body of our function. So what we've done is now all of this we've rewritten as this right here. It's the exact same thing, except it's a little bit cleaner because we don't have to do return function because we have that implicit return with our arrow functions. And then now we can copy the body of this last inner function right here. Paste that in right there. Fix the indentation. And there we go. Now we have our checker middleware, and it's a little bit cleaner because we're using arrow functions. And if we check that this still works, it does. So what we're going to do in the next video is we are going to see another example of using middleware. That will allow us to see kind of a more real life example, but it'll also allow us to see how we can have more than one middleware in our application.